rifle presented to the public was a Mauser 30-06, found abandoned with one spent casing in its chamber and 3 live rounds still in the magazine. Authorities framed it as the murder weapon, but the bullet taken from Charlie Kirk's body has never been confirmed to match this rifle. And that is the problem. Ballistics is simple. A bullet carries the unique markings of the barrel that fired it. If the bullet and the rifle do not align, then the weapon shown is not the weapon used. Without that connection, the rifle is not proof. It is a display, and the truth remains unsettled.
The very first truth in this case didn't come from investigators or from polished statements given behind microphones. It came from someone with no agenda, no political shield, and no reason to bend facts. It came from a doctor. This doctor wasn't speculating or offering theories. He was standing over Charlie Kirk in those frantic moments when every second mattered, when the only priority was survival in that desperate fight. He confirmed what could not be denied. A bullet had torn through Charlie's body. That was the first undeniable truth, the first hard piece of evidence in a case that has since become tangled with contradictions and shifting narratives. Logically, this fact should have anchored the entire investigation. It should have been the cornerstone around which clarity and justice were built. A single bullet, analyzed properly, compared against the alleged weapon, should have provided direction and certainty. But instead of answers, this fact became the spark for something darker, the beginning of confusion. Because the bullet this doctor described does not neatly match the rifle that investigators later paraded before cameras as the so-called murder weapon. The casing, the markings, the trajectory, all of it raised questions instead of providing closure. And when the very first truth doesn't fit the official narrative, it forces us to wonder, how many other pieces of this puzzle have been forced into place? If the first truth contradicts the story we're being told, then what else has been hidden, altered, or silenced along the way? Not long after the doctor's testimony introduced the first shred of undeniable truth, investigators quickly shifted the public's attention away from his words and towards something far more theatrical, something that looked conclusive on the surface: a rifle. It wasn't presented quietly or cautiously. It was revealed with the weight of spectacle. A Mauser .30-06 bolt-action rifle, lifted into the light like a hunter's prize, its cold steel gleaming, as if to signal that the mystery had been solved. The chamber told part of its story. One spent casing still lodged inside, suggesting a single deadly shot had been fired. The magazine added to the narrative, holding 3 live rounds, silent reminders of what might have been used had the shooter continued. But it wasn't just the ammunition that disturbed observers. Scattered among the casings were chilling details, inscriptions, strange engravings that investigators described as taunts. These weren't just bullets. They had been turned into messages, eerie signals left behind, as if the shooter wanted not just to kill, but to communicate. This rifle was paraded before the cameras, as if it were the ultimate answer, the final piece that would tie everything together. The tone of the announcement made it feel like the end of the search, the closing chapter of the investigation. But beneath, the performance lingered a question that no display of evidence could erase. Did the bullet actually fit the gun? Because without that undeniable bridge, without the forensic link between the bullet that pierced Charlie Kirk and the weapon held up for the world to see, this wasn't proof. It was theater. It was performance dressed up as certainty. And performance can never replace the truth. Ballistics is not some arcane science reserved for specialists cloaked in mystery. It is straightforward, proven, and methodical. Every bullet that leaves a barrel is forever marked by it, etched with microscopic striations that act like a fingerprint. No 2 barrels leave the exact same patterns, and no bullet can disguise the story of its journey. That's the beauty of forensic ballistics. It doesn't rely on guesses, narratives, or speculation. It relies on certainty. When investigators truly want to know which gun fired a bullet, the process is simple. They test fire rounds from the suspected weapon. They place those test bullets under comparison microscopes, lining them up against a bullet pulled from the victim's body. When the grooves, ridges, and striations match perfectly, the evidence speaks louder than any press conference ever could. It says with absolute clarity, this was the weapon. And yet in this case, that moment of certainty never reached us. We were shown the rifle. We were told it was recovered. Headlines echoed the phrase murder weapon, as if repeating it enough times would make it fact. But in all the noise, the one thing that actually mattered, the confirmation that the bullet fired into Charlie Kirk came from that very Mauser rifle, was never stated outright. Why? If the test had been done and the match had been perfect, wouldn't officials have shouted it from the rooftops? Wouldn't they have held up the results as the final nail in the coffin of doubt? Instead, their silence is deafening, and silence in the face of evidence often speaks volumes. Instead of answers, the public was handed a series of carefully crafted images. Visuals meant to reassure, not to inform. Photographs splashed across headlines showed agents moving methodically through the trees, carrying the Mauser rifle, with gloved hands, as though the act itself was a declaration of certainty. Officials stood before microphones, nodding gravely, their body language heavy with the performance of authority. Reporters, eager for a definitive story, echoed the narrative word for word, amplifying the same message. The weapon had been found. The case was closing in. But beneath that performance, something vital was missing. The silence surrounding the bullet, the silence about whether its fingerprint matched the rifle, grew louder than all the stage images combined. That unspoken truth overshadowed every photograph, every solemn nod, every repeated headline. Because what mattered most was not the sight of the weapon in the hands of law enforcement, but the science that could tie it to the crime. And on that front, there was nothing. When institutions choose performance over proof, the entire pursuit of justice falters. Justice is supposed to be about facts, evidence, and certainty, but what the public received instead felt like theater. Carefully staged acts designed to close questions, not answer them. And in theater, the lights are designed to dazzle, to blind the audience to what's happening in the shadows. That is a danger here. When we mistake stagecraft for truth, we risk accepting an illusion in place of justice. And illusions cannot deliver justice. They only bury it deeper. The bullet should have been the immovable anchor of this entire case. The one piece of evidence no story, no spin, no performance could ever change. It was supposed to serve as the undeniable bridge between a life cut short and the weapon claimed to have delivered that fatal wound. In any honest investigation, that connection becomes a foundation upon which every charge, every prosecution, and every verdict is built. Without it, there is no case. Only speculation dressed as certainty. But here, the bullet has not anchored anything. Instead, it has become the missing link. The only glimpse of truth came in those first desperate moments, spoken by the doctor who saw with his own eyes that a bullet had torn into Charlie Kirk's body. That truth was raw, undeniable, and yet, from that moment forward, it was quietly swallowed by silence. What should have been front and center faded into shadows, as though the evidence itself had become inconvenient. We were shown a rifle, paraded for cameras and headlines. We were told about a bullet, confirmed by a man who fought to save Kirk's life. But the vital connection, the forensic bridge between the two, was never given. No test results, no confirmation, no microscopic proof that the grooves of that bullet matched the barrel of that Mauser. And without that bridge, everything else we've been told is nothing more than narrative. A story stitched together to sound convincing, but a story nonetheless. In the absence of proof, what remains of performance? And performance cannot convict. Only truth can. Here lies the chilling heart of this entire case. The detail that refuses to fade no matter how many press conferences or headlines try to drown it out. The simplest, most straightforward test in all of forensic ballistics, the match between bullet and barrel, was either never conducted, never passed, or deliberately never revealed. There is no other explanation for why the results have been withheld, and that silence, more than any weapon or photograph, speaks volumes. Because truth does not simply vanish. It doesn't evaporate into thin air, and it doesn't dissolve when it becomes inconvenient. Truth remains. It waits, buried under layers of distraction, stagecraft, and official statements carefully crafted to keep the public looking one way, while the real answers lie hidden in another direction. If that truth is absent from the record, it is because someone buried it. So the question we are forced to confront is not just what happened, but who buried the proof? Who decided that the public didn't deserve to know whether the bullet that ended Charlie Kirk's life matched the rifle displayed as the supposed murder weapon? Was the silence born of incompetence, or was it choice? Justice without proof is not justice at all. It becomes something else, an illusion of order, a form of control designed to pacify rather than to reveal. Until the silence around that missing test is broken, until the bridge between bullet and barrel is shown, justice for Charlie Kirk does not exist. It remains unfinished, suspended in shadows, waiting for truth to rise again. Was this a simple failure, an oversight born of sloppy procedure under staff labs or bureaucratic incompetence? Or was it something far more deliberate, a conscious decision to hide the one piece of evidence that would either confirm the story or unravel it? Think about it. The mechanics of a proper investigation are routine. Ballistics testing is standard. Chain of custody protocols are baked into every major homicide inquiry. If a definitive match existed, it would be trumpet blown from every official mouthpiece. If it failed, the ramifications would be uncomfortable but explainable. So why the unusual quiet? Ask yourself who benefits from ambiguity. Who gains if the bridge between bullet and barrel is left unbuilt? Ambiguity preserves plausible deniability. It allows those in power to control the narrative, to present a tidy conclusion without the messiness of incontrovertible science. It protects reputations, careers, political interests, or something worse. And silence in such contexts is rarely accidental. It is a tool. It is a shield. This isn't just a question for armchair detectives. It's a civic demand. If you care about truth, you have a stake in whether the smallest, simplest test was done and reported transparently. It matters because real people are affected. A family who deserves finality, a community that deserves to trust its institutions, and a public that deserves to know whether justice is being pursued or managed. So tell us what you think. Was this negligence, a system that failed Charlie Kirk at the moment that mattered most, or was it an intentional choice to bury the truth? Leave your thoughts below and make your voice part of the record. And subscribe so you don't miss the next update. Because until that silence is pierced, this story is far from over.